Indiana Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following. Indiana University's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, presenting Security Matters, with tips for improving online security in 3 minutes or less. Main Source Bank, headquartered in Greensburg, Indiana, offering products and services to fit every stage of life. More information at mainsourcebank.com. Main Source, life needs a great bank. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Smithville Communications, serving Southern Indiana with high-speed fiber gigabit internet. Smithville Fiber Gigabit Technology. Tap the power.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.
Coming up on Indiana Newsdesk.
No state has the public policy goal of making alcohol readily available.
A judge throws out a lawsuit that would have allowed you to pick up a cold beer at a convenience store. Why the judge says his court isn't the place to hash out the debate, and who he thinks is responsible for deciding Indiana's alcohol laws. Indiana police are issuing more tickets to teens who are texting behind the wheel, but is it making an impact?
You've heard the term pick your poison. I've heard in some studies that they do believe that texting while driving is just as dangerous or more dangerous than driving under the influence of alcohol.
Is policing enough? Ahead on Indiana Newsdesk, the latest statistics on teen texting and driving. Plus, in our Ask the Mayor segment, we take your questions to Bloomington's Mark Kruzan. Those stories and a look at this week's top stories right now on Indiana Newsdesk. Hello, I'm Joe Wren, and welcome to Indiana Newsdesk. A judge this week decided to throw out a lawsuit challenging Indiana's cold beer laws. Currently, only liquor stores can sell beer cold in Indiana. Convenience stores and gas stations were suing for that same right. They argue the law gave unequal protection to liquor stores, and they called the law arcane. The head of the Indiana Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association called the ruling disappointing for Hoosiers. In a statement, IPCA Director Scott Imus wrote, "There is wide support to modernize Indiana's alcohol laws, and we will continue to fight for fairness in the marketplace." But in his ruling, U.S. District Judge Richard Young wrote, "Equal protection is not a license for courts to judge the wisdom, fairness, or logic of legislative choices." Quinn Ricker, who owns a chain of more than 50 convenience stores based in Anderson, was one of the plaintiffs in the suit. He says store owners have been pushing legislators for years to relax Indiana's alcohol laws, but he says they've never gotten anywhere. That, he says, is why they went through the court system.
The liquor lobby's been very strong in this state, and it's probably why this is in place today. But when we've tried our efforts in that fashion, and we felt like this was the best case scenario to change these antiquated liquor laws.
The judge's ruling also rejected claims by the convenience store group that the law is arcane, saying the legislature has drawn a line on what it will allow and has made a case for it. So it's not for the judge to act as a super legislature and overturn it. This echoes what the president and CEO of Indiana's Association of Beverage Retailers told us in February. Patrick Tam says the General Assembly, not the court, is the place to make public policy decisions.
For many years, many decades now, states have had the rights under the 21st Amendment to determine how and who sells alcohol in their states. We believe that Indiana has found a good balance for that. Other states have done various other matters as well. However, we believe that the state of Indiana has created a system that's worked well for its public.
In a statement, Indiana Attorney General Greg Zeller praised the judge's decision. The statute we successfully defended reflects the current decision of the people's elected representatives in the legislature, Zeller said. The subject has been debated for many years, but the appropriate forum for those who disagree with the state law to advocate for policy changes is in the state legislature, not the courts. And joining us now to talk about the legislators' role in this debate is Indiana Public Broadcasting State House reporter Brandon Smith. Brandon, as we just heard, the Attorney General, whose office defended the state in the lawsuit, says that the debate of this issue belongs with the legislature. Has the legislature debated this before?
A little bit. Groups like the IPCA, which is the Indiana Petroleum Marketers and Convenience Store Association, have been pushing to end this ban on cold beer sales for a while now, but for the most part, their path in the legislature hasn't been too successful, which is partly why they took this matter to court.
Now that the issue has been rejected by the courts, do you think that you expect the legislature to bring this up again?
Well, like I said, they've been pushing for, and the IPCA has pledged to continue to fight for what they call fairness in the marketplace. And since the legal route seems unlikely to bring them to victory, it seems the legislative avenue seems the most likely at this point to be the course they choose.
If the legislature did take up cold beer sales, do you have any sense of what their arguments could be this time around?
It would be similar to what we saw in court, which is the IPCA says it doesn't make a lot of sense to reject them selling cold beer when, for instance, they can sell cold wine in their stores, and they say it creates confusion among their customers. They also argue that they have been historically more successful when it comes to following the state's alcohol laws. The Indiana Excise Police report that there have been more infractions given out to liquor stores, restaurants, and bars than they have to convenience stores.
Well, and then, Brennan, what about all the opposing arguments as well to this?
Well, proponents of the ban say that by allowing cold beer sales everywhere, it greatly expands access to alcohol by minors. Liquor stores don't allow customers under the age of 21 to enter, but that doesn't exist, obviously, in convenience stores, so it makes it tougher for law enforcement to police minor alcohol possession.
Now, Brandon, you're there at the State House every day. Do you have any sense with legislators what they're saying about this right now?
I talked to the chairs of the House and Senate Public Policy Committees, which is where alcohol regulation bills typically go through. The House chair, Tom Dermody, said he was willing to keep an open mind on this issue. He'll talk to people on both sides of the debate this summer. The Senate chair, however, Ron Alting, is pretty dead set against changing the ban on cold beer sales.
And then there's the other issue that we have to talk about very briefly, though, and that's the sales of alcohol on Sundays. Any chance of that coming up in the Indiana legislature this coming year?
As opposed as Ron Alting is to changing the ban on cold beer sales, he seems a lot more likely to allow Sunday sales.
Okay, thank you very much, Brandon.
Thank you, Joe.
Now we go over to Alex Dirkman for a look at this week's top stories.
Thank you very much, Joe. Indiana's private school voucher system is costing the state $16 million this year. That's according to a report released Tuesday by the Indiana Department of Education. The voucher system gives state money to low-income students so they can attend private schools. It has saved the state about $4 million in each of the first 2 years it was in existence. But the report indicates that a recent change that now allows students already attending private schools to receive public aid has significantly increased the cost of that program. Indiana Congressman Marlin Stutzman will not become the next House Majority Whip. House Majority Leader Eric Cantor was defeated in a primary earlier this month, essentially forcing him out of the position. Kevin McCarthy was elected to replace Cantor, leaving his position as the House Majority Whip open. Stutzman was one of 3 representatives vying for that seat, but Representative Steve Scalise, not Stutzman, was chosen as the replacement. Stutzman said before the vote that he had 50 people supporting him. A total of 117 votes were needed to win. Central Indiana home prices are up 7% from last year. That's according to realtor F.C. Tucker. Most of the 9 counties that F.C. Tucker tracks have seen a steady rise in home prices this year compared to the first half of 2013. Shelby County saw the highest rise with a 24% increase in average home sale prices. Boone County came in second with a 9% increase. The General Assembly is making small tweaks to legislation passed earlier this year. Lawmakers and prosecutors discovered technical errors in the criminal code overhaul bill as the 2014 session drew to a close, but it was too late to fix the mistakes before the legislature adjourned. So the General Assembly reconvened Tuesday for less than an hour to correct those mistakes. The fixes include ensuring child molesters must serve at least 85% of their sentence and making some clarifications on which drug amounts result in stricter sentences. Indiana is mailing postcards to more than 700,000 Hoosiers as it begins the second phase of an effort to clean up its voter rolls. Earlier this year, the Secretary of State's office sent postcards to every Hoosier on the active voter list. About 727,000 postcards were sent back as undeliverable. That's about 16% of the total voter list. A second round of now forwardable postcards has been sent out, and this time the Secretary of State says the state wants voters to respond, updating their registration information. Those that do not respond will have their record marked as inactive. But that won't remove voters from the rolls. They can still show up to vote between now and January of 2017. The Indiana Mother's Milk Bank is partnering with the Indiana Blood Center in hopes of boosting breast milk donations. This week, the Indiana Mother's Milk Bank opened 7 new drop-off centers in existing Indiana Blood Center locations, bringing total milk donation sites in the state to 20. The new locations are in Carmel, Columbus, Indianapolis, Fishers, Greenwood, Muncie, and Terre Haute. After a mother donates, the collected milk will be transported into the Indiana Mother's Milk Bank, where it is pasteurized and sent to hospitals to feed premature or sick infants. The Indiana Blood Centers are also providing blood tests if mothers want to be screened so they can become an approved donor. The head of Family and Social Services Administration is set to leave her post soon. The governor's office confirms that the administration has begun discussions with Deborah Minot on what it calls a change in direction at the FSSA. No timetable has been set, but the governor's team is working with Minot on a transition plan. FSSA is currently developing a preschool pilot program, and the state's largest agency is also seeking federal approval for the governor's healthcare expansion program, HIP 2.0. Pence says Minot will continue to play a role in securing that approval until her successor takes over. Indiana won't be helping low-income families cool their homes this summer. The Indiana Housing and Community Development Authority traditionally offers households $50 benefits to pay their cooling bills during the hot summer months. But state officials say they're out of money after spending nearly $50 million this fiscal year on heating assistance during this past brutal winter. The Indiana University Board of Trustees today approved a plan that could displace 6 houses in the historic University Courts neighborhood to allow construction of the new Phi Gamma Delta fraternity house. A land swap with the city would allow construction to take place on the southwestern edge of IU's campus. The plan is contingent on whether the fraternity can raise the funds for the project. The final details have not been worked out, but the university would likely move 4 existing houses in the neighborhood to a nearby location and demolish 2 others to make room for the new building. And the Indiana State Fair judges are weighing entries for this year's signature food. The 5 finalists include the cheeseburger basket on a stick, a deep-fried meat and potatoes creation, and the Mac Daddy, a bed of mac and cheese topped with barbecued turkey. 6 judges will make recommendations, but the final vote will be cast online by the public. While Hoosiers will be able to sample all of the dishes at the fair, the signature food receives special recognition and promotion from fair organizers. And Joe, voters can actually cast their ballots this Monday online. Will you try that chicken basket on a stick?
I think early indications is I'm voting for the Mac Daddy.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, we'll see.
I'll try it.
Thanks, Alex. Coming up next on Indiana Newsdesk. Nearly half of all teenage drivers admit to texting while driving. We explain the dangers and why experts say they're hopeful that number will drop. In our Ask the Mayor segment, Bloomington Mayor Mark Kruzan answers your questions about I-69, safety along the Beeline Trail, and building restrictions on downtown apartment buildings. And the World Cup is being held in Brazil, but players here in Indiana aren't missing out on the fun.
Like sometimes I act like, oh, my favorite player is like Ronaldo, so I try to like when you play like World Cup with your friends, like I pick Portugal or USA and I'll pick a player.
How the World Cup in professional soccer is helping the sport gain popularity in the Hoosier State. These stories right here on Indiana Newsdesk.
We believe in the excitement of exploration, that life offers each of us adventures that are ours for the taking. We believe that children are born explorers who need trusted guides on their journeys of discovery. We believe in breaking new ground and in challenging assumptions, that important questions deserve to be explored deeply, fairly, and honestly. And we believe that who you are and where you come from should never stand in the way of what you want to be. This is who we are. this is what we believe. This is PBS.
Welcome back to Indiana Newsdesk. I'm Joe Wren. A decreasing number of teens are using drugs, drinking alcohol, having sex, and smoking. But the annual Youth Risk Behavior Survey shows nearly half of all teenagers in the U.S. are texting or emailing behind the wheel. That despite horrific stories of fatal accidents, awareness campaigns that show graphic images on billboards and commercials, and the potential for fines if caught. Sarah Whitmire reports on the statistics in Indiana and explains why officials say parents are going to have to take the lead to change teens' behavior.
Glenn Hatfield doesn't look nervous riding beside Delaney Cole as she takes the wheel for one of her first driving lessons. Perhaps it's because he's been doing this for more than 50 years.
Most dangerous time in teenagers' careers are between the ages of 16 and 26. That's dangerous because it's when they're driving and they're learning to drive.
Hatfield wants his students to stay safe. That's why he teaches them to devote 100% of their attention just to driving when they get behind the wheel.
It's a new adventure. And if you add the distraction of texting while you do that, it diverts attention away from learning to drive. It's very, very dangerous.
I've heard in some studies that they do believe that texting while driving is just as dangerous or more dangerous than driving under the influence of alcohol. So, one completely you lose your reflex time. The other one you take your eyes completely off the roadway. So it's a balance there. Which is more dangerous? I say both of them.
It's illegal to text and drive in Indiana. Police wrote 52 tickets the first year the law went on the books in 2011. In 2012, that number reached 216, and last year it was just shy of 200 at 186. But still, teens, and often adults too, continue to text. For the first time in its annual Youth Risk Behavior Survey, which monitors teenage behavior, the Centers for Disease Control asked teens about texting. What they found is that texting is a frequent problem.
This really is a high number. That's the first thing we need to get the word out about. Nearly half the kids are texting while driving, 41%. And if you compare to a behavior that gets a lot of headlines, smoking, only 16% of kids admit to smoking. Now that's still 16% too much. But when you look at it, the texting rate is more than double, almost triple the smoking rate. So while smoking gets a lot of attention at 16%, how much more concerned should we be when texting is at 41%?
The survey shows smoking is at an all-time low. 15.7% of teens reported smoking a cigarette at least once in the past month, down from an all-time high of 36.4% in 1997. Teen pregnancy is also declining dramatically.
These are things 20, 30 years ago that were thought to be intractable, that it was too late. There was no way we could get these numbers to come down. And yet they have come down because parents have spoken and modeled, because society has sent messages. It has happened in those other areas of youth behavior. It can happen in this one if we follow the same strategies.
The Indiana State Police has an awareness campaign which includes radio spots, social media messages, and interviews with people who lost loved ones in texting while driving accidents. Delaney Cole lost a classmate in a car accident, and texting was considered to be a likely factor. She says when she gets her license at the end of the month, she'll keep her phone in the back seat of the car or in the trunk.
I just think people need to know that it's dangerous and it can wait. I mean, any text that you have can wait, and if not, then you can find somewhere to pull over and call your parents or whatever you need to do. Don't do it while driving.
And another study this week looking at teen driving deaths shows Indiana is the worst place in the country. The study from Wallet Hub shows Indiana has more teen driving deaths per licensed teen driver than any other state. The study also shows Indiana ranking in the number 2 spot when it comes to the number of teens being ticketed for drinking and driving. And now it's Ask the Mayor with Bloomington's Mark Kruzan. Several people sent us questions this week via our website and Twitter, so we picked out a few and took them to the mayor. Here's what he had to say. I know you've been in contact with INDOT and the progress of I-69 through Bloomington. Amy wants to know what is being done with the hundreds of trees that have been taken down off of Indiana 37.
I do not know. I will say in terms of the trees, what INDOT does is commit for a 2-to-1 replacement, so that for every tree that's lost, new trees are planted elsewhere in the community at the state's expense as part of the project. With the project itself, I mean, our biggest concern are the issues that are occurring in Section 4 with soil erosion and apparently lack of adequate controls that are in place, and we're trying to get in front of that with the state, because eventually Section 5, which goes through the city boundaries, will begin.
Amy also asked about the road crossings on the Beeline Trail. There are some places, I guess, where cars can't see pedestrians or bikes that seem to be moving quickly, and was wondering if there were any safety precautions or anything that might change in terms of, and she knows it's kind of a, no pun intended, but a two-way street. You know, you don't want to put stop signs on every Beeline crossing, but on the same token, she's concerned about safety there. Has that come up at all?
Well, it had, and that, again, we, before the construction, went through every single intersection, and then after construction have gone through and changed some things around, moved the stop signs that are there for bikes, cyclists and pedestrians back a little bit, so there was more notice, more signage. But I'd have to know what, in terms of spots where it's not, visibility is low, I'd want to know where that is, because I'm not familiar with any place where that's a problem. But certainly we'll go out and take a look at any place that people feel that their safety isn't all that it should be.
We'll jump to Karen. She wants to know if you would consider monitoring the aesthetics of some of the apartment buildings that keep going up downtown.
Yeah, I mean, I have myself mixed opinions about some of the buildings that have been built over the years, and we certainly hear that. You know, there are already some design standards that are in place, and different types of building materials that are prohibited. You saw that debate even come up with the habitat development and what people wanted them to look like and be made out of. So there are probably more restrictions in place than some people might think.
Karen would like to know more about if anything will be updated or changed with the parking meter situation. For her main problem is going to downtown churches for funerals and weddings during the week.
Well, yeah, I guess in terms of the specifics of that particular question, you know, there are dozens and dozens of cities with meters that have churches in their downtowns, and you know, people seem to be able to manage it. So I'm not sure that Bloomington's any more unique than any other community with that kind of an issue. The other thing is we can't set policy based on the exception. We can't, the number of funerals or weddings in the middle of a week is so small compared to the daily demand that we have for parking downtown that we can't set a policy based on one person's need for one wedding maybe once a year.
You can find the full conversation and the mayor's response to more questions at WTIUnews.org. And while you're there, send us a question to news@indianapublicmedia.org, or you can tweet us at AskTheMayor. Next time we visit with Kokomo's Greg Goodnight. The World Cup is taking place, and U.S. fans seem as excited as ever about this year's event. In fact, people in the U.S. bought nearly 200,000 tickets to the games. That's second only to the host country, Brazil. But for those of us who aren't able to make it to the games in person, Jimmy Jenkins reports there's plenty of excitement to be shared here in the U.S. and even in Indiana.
While Hoosiers may be known for their love of basketball, Indiana is no stranger to soccer. A new professional team in Indianapolis sold out all 5 games in its inaugural season.
I think having just finished kind of our first season here in Indianapolis with the Indy 11, people are already in a soccer mood. So this is kind of a carryover from that. We just had our last home game a couple weekends ago. Now the World Cup being kind of during this break between our 2 seasons helped to kind of continue that support for soccer and keep the soccer mood alive, keep the fans excited, give them something to continue to cheer for while they wait for Indy 11 to kick back off.
Coach Todd Yeagley credits the popularity of the sport in part to a camp his father started in Bloomington.
I mean, you think back when my family first started the camp and he was first to coach here in the mid-'70s, you couldn't buy a soccer ball in town. you'd have to go to Indianapolis.
More than 40 years later, IU's Bloomington campus is home to one of the world's most prestigious soccer camps.
It's a tremendous growth, and you see that in every step of the way. The college game, our professional league is doing really well, Major League Soccer, our national team has benefited, and obviously we're seeing that at the World Cup level, which is the pinnacle of our sport.
And that's generating more interest from young soccer players.
When I play, like sometimes I act like, oh, my favorite player is like Ronaldo, so I try to like when you play like World Cup with your friends, like I pick Portugal or USA and I'll pick a player. It's fun.
After a week of learning and competing with each other, the campers plan to get together this Sunday to watch the USA take on Portugal.
And if you want to watch Sunday's game, there are plenty of watch parties around the state. Here's a list of a few of them. Many are free, some others charge a small admission, so be sure to check before you go. And that's the end of this program, but our work continues online as we cover the news in southern Indiana throughout the week at WTIUnews.org. Have a great weekend.
The Newsdesk is made possible in part by the following: Indiana University's Center for Applied Cybersecurity Research, presenting Security Matters with tips for improving online security in 3 minutes or less. Main Source Bank, headquartered in Greensburg, Indiana, offering products and services to fit every stage of life. More information at mainsourcebank.com. Main Source, life needs a great bank. Member FDIC and equal housing lender.
Smithville Communications, serving southern Indiana with high-speed fiber gigabit internet. Smithville Fiber Gigabit Technology. Tap the power.
And by WTIU members. Thank you.